Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of MTG Study Hall, social distancing edition, now and for a long time. I am one of your hosts, not forever, hopefully. I am one of your hosts, Brett, and I am joined by Lily, JC, and Eric is come back on the show this week, and so we're super happy to have you back, Eric. It was great having you back. God, what was it, 8 or 9 months ago? So it's been a little bit.
Longer than that, because 9 months ago was when I had my surgery, and it was before that. So
okay, but I think we're actually past the year mark.
It's been a minute, yeah.
It was the last con that JC went to, I think.
I think so. So it's been a while.
Yeah, the last con I went to was Gen Con when it was not COVID. I think I might went to an anime con. I don't know. I go to cons.
Like the 4th or 5th episode. Anyway,
we have a lot to talk about. But before we have to get to that, we have to take care of some bookkeeping. Tam, would you like to take care of that for us?
Yeah, absolutely. So if you like the content, make sure and you want us to go out and support us, go to patreon.com/TCG University. Sub at any of those levels to get awesome support, just like all of these awesome people have. We have Addie, Andrew Dang, Anthony Albano, Bryce Rastak, Chris Miner, Clay Cardwell, Jacob Arshan Masur, Jay Rogers, Jarrett Hubbard, Jesse Morrison, Jesse Nix, John Stone, Justin Forrest, Justin Hobbs, Kat Maria, Kevin Broberg, Kieran Vision, Lucinda Letica, Okimala, Orlando Valdez Santos, Paul Casagrande, Peyton Kiker, Ransom MacArthur, Samantha Stevens, the baddest bitch around, Sean O'Brien, Tudor Ruiz, and Tyler Zane Pease. Thank you guys so much. If you don't have any bucks to toss, that's totally chill. You can go to youtube.com/TCG University about a week later and get the whole episode for free with ads. And support us on our other platforms like Facebook and Twitch. Speaking of Twitch, we've got we're starting to do these monthly giveaways. So I'm going to be working with the Magic team to figure out a monthly Magic giveaway to give away to any of our Twitch subscribers. So this is the first time they're hearing about it.
Yes.
Yeah, so starting next month, we're going to be doing giveaways. So sub out on Twitch in order to get the raffle in to get cool free stuff.
And you have decent odds for the Magic side of things because a lot of the people who watch my show are live in my house and probably would not be reasonable to have them eligible to win. So you have a decent chance.
For sure. Lastly, the show's brought to you by Nuclear Inked Custom Tattoo and Skate Shop, Cards Custom Build, Inked Gaming, and Dex Protection, but I'll talk about those a bit later.
All right, thank you so much, Tam. Before we launch into everything, we're just going to do our normal quick pass around and see what everyone's been doing in Magic this past week. Lily, you want to start?
Oh gosh. I am itching to dive into Sealed for the new Amonkhet re-release. That's been super I've been excited for that. I haven't really played a ton this week. I played Brawl. Lost a lot. I'm realizing that the deck that I love playing the most and have the most fun playing, I don't win many games, but I do lose very slowly.
So everyone loses, kind of. You lose and your opponent has to spend 20 minutes for a Brawl win.
I'll be playing for 3 hours and have a bunch of really good games, and they'll be like, oh, I only have 2 wins.
Oh boy, yeah, I've had some of those recently. Anything else? Alrighty, JC, what have you been doing Magic this past week?
Oh, I was looking at a lot of the art for the Amonkhet remaster as it was coming out, and just thinking about how I felt like Ikoria and some more of the recent sets have been very colorful and very bright, vibrant and stuff like that. And I feel like a lot of Amonkhet art is very
orange,
dusty, orange. Yeah, and that's appropriate. It's for its setting and for its tone, but it almost reminds me of the original Diablo, and how it was very if you have blue, it's blue plus gray. If you have purple, it's purple plus gray. And there's some cards that are colorful, but by and large, it's a very dusty kind of looking set, and that's totally cool for what it is. It's just I guess I'm having art opinions on it, and I like it. I just don't know how I feel about it. So yeah, that's a thing.
Okay. Did you see that? I was gonna say, did you see that they pulled the wrong art on Arena? I don't know if that made it to the final release, but they took one of the showcase Egyptian style invocations, and they tried, instead of putting the one for Lord of Extinction, they took the art from Maelstrom Pulse and put it on Lord of Extinction. Did you see that?
I did not notice that.
Well, It kind of works. You got the little like green guy that's being exploded.
Yeah.
He looks like he could be an elemental.
So yeah, that was a weird thing that happened. But anyway, a little bit off track. Eric, what have you been doing this past week in Magic?
Let's see. I played a lot of Double Masters Draft on Magic Online. I played the Super Singleton event on Arena. I played a lot of. I've been playing Jumpstart events on Arena constantly since it started. Like I haven't stopped. I've also been dealing with Double Masters at my store a lot. We sold out almost everything over the weekend, but we just sold the last of it yesterday, and I've also opened more of it than I probably should have myself. So I've been dealing with sorting all that and bookkeeping for it, all that as well. So
okay, and I did forget
lots of stuff.
I said this in the pre-show. I want to say it now. So Eric is one of the owners at Krypton Comics here in Omaha, Nebraska. So shout out there, which we generally shout out to Krypton because that's the store that we generally use. So if you're in town, check Krypton out. They are awesome. As for me, I opened my box of Double Masters that I got from Krypton with Kat, and we actually played. I wanted a chance to play a little Double Masters, and I don't like Moto, so me and Kat split the box in half, and we did 12 packs sealed, which was pretty fun. We were able to actually, you could do some archetype stuff instead of the professor, when he did his review of the set, said it sealed's a little tricky just because there's so many archetypes, it's hard to narrow down. But I was able to try to have a dumb ramp deck where I put down one of my 2 blight steals that we opened. But no, it was a sweet box. Got a lot of neat stuff. Got like 4 or 5 swords out of it. So
okay,
yeah.
So that is a question I was actually going to ask. Do you have a notion of how many mythics you opened in your box?
God, it seems like we opened a lot. I feel like we 2 batter skulls, 5 to 6 swords, foil blight steel, regular blight steel, ensnaring bridge, Avacyn. I mean, golly, I think we opened 15 plus.
So I think the boxes that we got at our store had an absolutely obscene amount of mythics in them. Like sometimes as much as 3 times as many as they're supposed to. I was hearing some complaints both on Twitter and in the Wizards retailers support group on Facebook of store owners throughout the country getting customer complaints that they were only having like 1, 2, 3 mythics in their Double Masters boxes. So somebody posted a thread where all the retailers could check in and be like, all right, what's the average number of mythics that your customers are getting in their boxes? And most of them said, 5 to 7, 6 to 9, somewhere in that range. I've done a mythic count of, at this point with yours, like 6 different boxes opened from our store, and they have all had between like 15 and 18 mythics opened in our boxes.
I bought from the right place,
which makes an obscene amount of difference in value. Like, it's
turns out,
and I'm not complaining, mind you, because I got 2 of those boxes for myself and got absolutely absurd value from them. But something super hinky with the distribution of mythics in that set. So
that's weird, but yeah. So glad I bought from you guys.
I feel really bad for the people who got screwed, obviously, but
that's a lot of money to spend on a box where you're supposed to get double of everything and get 2 or 3. So yeah, effing chat for them. But
double.
And it could be a collating issue, right? Like they.
Yeah, I mean,
presumably both the rares have like separate things that they pull from.
And I don't know if it was a matter of the boxes coming from different printing locations or what, but yeah, I from the 3 boxes I actually was able to sort and count and add up. There were between 2 and 4 copies of several different mythics, 0 copies of a bunch of regular rares, and in those 3 boxes there was almost $2,100 in value from just the rares and mythics alone.
Amazing.
Wow. Yeah, I know our box was, and me and Kat split it, so I was like doing my math of like, so here's my like 160 I spent on it, and I was like, oh wow, I got a lot of cards.
Yeah, that's like the three of the swords.
Yeah, no, I mean, it was, me and Kat just laid on all the rares and just went, okay, what do you want? What do I want? Oh yeah, and then with the box topper, I also got an Atraxis, so that didn't suck. So yeah, it was a sweet box. Did that. Like Eric, I played a ton of Jumpstart. I almost got all of the lands in Arena. I missed out on 3, including the one I wanted the most, the Phyrexian Swamp. But they said they will bring that back, so there is hope for the future.
I think probably.
I'm missing 1. Pirates.
Oh, man.
I suspect it'll be one of those things they bring back when things are going to start getting.
Yeah, or they'll bring it back a week before release, so they make us burn through all our money.
That's true.
Which they seem to do when they do that, and then they dump out all new lands. Which they released Amonkhet, and then they released a bunch of all new lands you can buy for gems.
I want them so bad. I love the Nicol Bolas Horn lands. They're my favorite full art lands next to the Theros Nyx lands.
They're really nice. But we recorded Brawling for Brett after a little bit of a hiatus. We had a horrendous time. We just ran into Kinnan and 5-color Niv, so we actually We played the tail end of the Singleton, 100-card Singleton event, and I'm really sad I only played 100-card Singleton there because it was really fun. It would have been nice to refine my deck. So maybe next time we get a 100-card Singleton coming through, we'll do Singletoning with. We're gonna keep it with Brawling with Brett.
Extra stream.
We should have been doing some extra streams, but we're gonna keep Brawling with Brett.
Oh, sorry, I had a lot of fun with the I had a lot of fun with the Super Singleton event once I stopped trying to be super gimmicky and just played good cards.
I just stuck a pile of red black mid range together, and it was very nice.
Without a commander to kind of guide the theme of your deck, trying to do the super gimmicky stuff didn't work too well. But when I just built Esper Control, I didn't lose a game after that. So
yeah, red black mid range that I hurriedly slapped together on stream worked pretty well.
Yeah,
so,
it was pretty good.
So that was a good time. So yeah, maybe some more of that when that comes back. So. That has been Week in Magic, so we are going to move on to the main topic of the show, and we are going to be discussing the article "Who's the Beatdown?" This article originally, Eric, do you want to? We were in the pre-show. We were talking about this a little bit. Would you mind giving a little bit of a rundown, since you might have the?
It's me. I'm the Beatdown.
Okay, yeah. There you go. I think we're good. Show done. Who's the Beatdown? It's Eric.
No, Who's the Beatdown was an article by Mike Flores, who is one of the most famous deck designers in Magic history. It was originally published in 1999 on a famous website called The Dojo, and then it was republished on I believe Star City Games in 2004. I think it was. And
that sounds right.
I just realized that my computer restarted and I lost all of the tabs I had open. So give me just a second.
I can jump in briefly, and I saw this as interesting because I read it off Star City Games because there was a point apparently where the dojo, which had been one of the main places for early Magic content, they basically were going under, and they're just like, "Hey everyone, can you save articles?" So we almost it's weird that this is. I just came up with this. This was our Library of Alexandria, I guess. So we had to preserve these documents and these articles, which seems a little overblown and silly, but we're talking about an article that that was written in 1999, and when we were talking about naming the show, we were like, do we want to call the episode is Who's the Beatdown still relevant? We were looking for whatever we're going to call the episode, and it's yes, it is to a degree. We're going to throw a link for the original article down below in the comments if you want to read it. It's a pretty quick read. Star City Games website has all of the cards linked, and a lot of the cards that are used in the article are all very old cards and very old decks, but the general principles of the article, I would say, are still very relevant. So who wants to talk about just the general themes, the loose overview of the article?
Sorry. I'm back. Yeah. Okay. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. We're on. You want to cover just the loose overview of it?
All right. So the gist of the article is Magic in general, decks take on particular roles within a game, like when you're playing against an opponent. Your deck in the abstract might be a really aggressive deck, might be a really controlling deck, might be kind of slower, might be faster. There's a lot of ways that a deck can be. But within the context of a game, even when your deck is very similar to your opponent's deck, there's this relational dynamic between the two decks that is important to understand to play against your opponent properly, even when your decks are very similar.
And yeah, just so everyone has the loose background. This is stuff that if you're watching a podcast about Magic the Gathering or just trading cards, you probably are familiar with the general archetypes, aggro or aggressive decks, combo decks that are trying to just execute their combo and win on their own with generally minimal interaction. Control decks who are going to be trying to win the long game, play the removal spells, play the board wipes and Magic, but drag the game out and outvalue your opponent. And it's when you're playing the mono red aggro deck and you're up against the Esper control deck, it's pretty simple to know who the aggressor is. And that's what the title of the article is referencing. It's who's the beatdown, who is the person who is going hard and using their the resources to lower their opponent's life total and kill them, or kill them with whatever means you're trying to kill them. Who is being the aggressor and who is not. Now, it's easy when you're doing that simple scenario I pitched, but the article kind of focuses on when you're not in that cut and dry, when you're the mono red deck and you're playing the mono white aggro deck. Generally, you'd think, well, you both want to be aggressive. And the article kind of posits that no, you need to look at your environment, you need to look at your deck, you need to look at your opponent's deck, and you need to figure out what role do I need to take on to win this game. Because while normally in 95% of the games I'm mono red, I want to go fast, that might not be the right choice.
Well, and it's not even necessarily the composition of the decks. Like, a lot of it has to do with reading the texture of the game you're in from a turn-to-turn basis and adjusting your role,
right.
Recognizing your role, because it's not necessarily that the person who's the beatdown has an advantage or anything like that, or inevitability or anything, or any of the such thing. It's that the person who recognizes their role and plays to their role more correctly than their opponent has an advantage. And the person who's the beatdown isn't necessarily going to always be the person with the more aggressive deck or the more aggressive situation. The who's the beatdown also applies to if you and your opponent are both playing a 75 card combo mirror, because the context of your draws and the context of the decisions you make in the first few turns of the game can determine what your role is on turn 3, whether or not you need to be the one who is going for it, or if you need to be the person who's waiting for your opponent to blink first, so then you can be reactionary. Identifying those situations and playing to them correctly is going to make a huge difference in the number of games you win over a long enough timeline.
Well, yeah, no, that's absolutely right. It's I don't know, when I was reading the article, the other thing that was like especially like, I think it's a lot more important in other, like, not just in like in like competitive formats, even like in multiplayer, especially, like that whole notion of understanding what role you're filling in the game right now. And the roles are a little different in multiplayer, but they're not so, like, especially in Commander, where every deck sort of trends towards this weird mid-range combo thing, depending on your metagame. I mean, I think this can matter quite a bit. And sometimes being on the offensive means that you're on the defensive against another player, but it's still like the premise still holds. Understanding those interactions can let you evaluate what your threats are in a multiplayer game and all that too.
No, I think it's useful to look at it in that kind of area, because I was playing Commander, and it's like with multiplayer, there's all sorts of extra dimensions, but you have to think about it's like, okay, I'm playing my deck, things have been going well, we're all kind of in the same spot. I've got Bolas the Citadel in my hand, which, for those of you who don't know, is a 6-man artifact that's going to let me play cards off the top of my library for paying life. And so if I play this card, I am going to become the aggressor. I'm going to become the target of everybody, and I need to decide, is this the point in the game where I'm going to commit to that, and I'm going to say, I'm going to try to kill you all now. I'm going to shift from being someone who is kind of maybe aiming to not draw that much attention, to slowly build resources, to live in that kind of aim for second place world that we talked about, and then know, is it time for me to shift my role, and I'm going to be something else? JC, I wanted to ask, you've been playing on and off for a long time, but you're not necessarily haven't always been like, I'm catching up on articles. Was this, I know we've talked about the article before on the show, was this the first time you'd been like generally introduced to this concept, or was this something that you'd like kind of had been in your sphere in the past?
No, actually, I think this is the second time I've read the article, but I think I originally read the article like back in 2003.
Okay.
I kind of agree with everything that's been said. I think it's actually like in the situation you were talking about too. It's not just recognizing that if I do this, I'm going to be in the position where I'm the target of everyone and I'm the aggressor. It's also thinking about it. the way the game is currently being played and the position in the game, does being the aggressor give me the best chance to win? Is this the point where, like, I have to recognize where I am and what I'm doing, and if I press the pedal right now and do this, commit to this course of action, committing to this course of action is understanding that these are the best outs for me. This is the way I'm going to win.
And I mean, I'm trying to think, I read the article a few days ago. Does the article talk much about like knowing when you want to shift that? Because I mean, I don't think it's as black and white as I am the beatdown, I am not the beatdown, and I will maintain this role for this until the game is complete. Because I think there's absolutely going to be time where you're going to need to feel it out and shift it around. Now, I'm trying to think, does that come up in the article, or is that something that later got expounded on?
Not so much. It doesn't talk about shifting. It more talks about like you should shift the second you identify that you are not playing the correct role.
Right.
Like there's, with the obvious exception that if you've already made, if the mistakes you've made up to this point will only be, multiplied by changing at this point, you may have to do a longer turnaround time, but it doesn't really address the actual turnaround itself. Like, it's an incredibly short article. Like the whole thing is maybe,
it really is,
maybe 1,000 words tops. It gives like 2 specific in-game examples where it's burn deck versus burn deck versus suicide black, who's got more damage, who's got more removal, who's got more permission to card drawing, everything's like that. And basically just identifying your role, and then knowing got dead cards and everything like that, and sideboarding whether or not you want to remove early creatures versus trying to save up burn to try and burn out your opponent, things like that. If you're trying to apply it to situations of, like, you've mentioned, two of you have mentioned multiplayer Magic a couple times. If you're trying to apply it to situations of multiplayer Magic, I think maybe a more relevant resource would be, Mike Flores did a follow-up to the Who's the Beatdown article back in like 2012, where he tried to kind of expand upon it, where he broke it down into, he called it the 8 core principles of Who's the Beatdown, where he goes into the specific elements of his thought process a little more in depth, and basically the 8 core principles. There are 2 kinds of decks. Their positions are fluid, so you aren't necessarily going to be the beatdown the whole game. You have to identify that it's going to shift, during the course of the game, and be able to adapt to that. Greed must be balanced against speed, so you need to decide whether or not you are trying to be the person who is going to try and win, or you need to decide whether you're going to be the person who's going to try and start amassing resources. You want to be the person, you want to be playing differently on the play and on the draw. That's more relevant to constructed Magic, obviously, than for multiplayer. Then it discusses, inevitability, which is another concept that was brought up in SV Moshevit's article. Then it goes on to discuss a whole bunch of different individual points, but that like those breakdowns can be used for multiplayer, probably a little more saliently than specifically the original article, which very specifically uses old school concepts of 1v1 Magic in high pressure tournament situations.
Well, so fair. I don't think those principles apply any less in multiplayer, though, is the big thing. Like, they're more complicated, but I don't think they apply less.
Well, something that kind of I wanted to bring up the creation of the concept of mid-range decks a little bit. Then I just had a thought of this.
20 years ago, they just didn't exist.
Well, so mid-range decks being in my head, and maybe this is not how everybody sees it, but in my head, the mid-range deck is the deck that is trying to position itself to be able to flex to where it needs to go. And so I'm curious, and the thought I had just kind of now, I was like, I want to talk about mid-range decks, is, do you think this kind of article and this kind of thinking led, and I mean, part of it was card level, power level. You couldn't play 6-drops if they were creatures because they didn't do anything and spells were better. So mid-range decks partially came into existence because they designed cards differently now than they did in 99. But I'm curious if the creation of that kind of deck is something that came out of this idea of who's the beatdown, what is this traditional role, I'm aggro, I'm control, can I build a deck that can try to be both? Can I be the control deck to the aggro deck and the aggro deck to the control deck? Thoughts?
I mean, it definitely. I don't know if they sprouted because of the introduction of the concept, but they definitely capitalize on the concept better than decks had in the past. They, mid-range decks are much more able to switch at a moment's notice or play, or plan to play a specific role against an opponent, especially a known opponent going into a match. The versatility of the switch is much more, much less violent and more fluid for sure.
So, Eric, I have a question, right? So,
What's up?
Way back and around the era the article was written, the era that the article was written, it was more aggro combo control, right?
Right.
Right. So since then, we've kind of added mid-range as as a general archetype. Is there a fifth? Because I could have sworn there was a fifth and I couldn't place it.
I mean, you could argue that like tempo decks like Delver popped up around the time of like in like 2012 or so, because they are simultaneously aggressive, but they do also pack more permission and removal than a lot of control decks do. So but they're kind of an offshoot.
Right.
It's I don't know if I would define them necessarily as an entirely separate archetype or not, but some people would for sure.
And Jason, do you have a thought? I saw you were doing motions.
Yeah, I was reminded of tempo decks and how they were espoused, and thinking about them as a very it's pretty much described in how the tempo. It's just kind of like the motion I was doing. It was a lot of it had a lot more removal. It had a lot more kind of control elements, but it was kind of a very beat driven deck. Like I'm going to beat and then hold and then beat and then hold.
Mm-hmm. I'm going to vomit everything in my hand out, or I'm going to just try to 1-for-1 everything you do till you're out of resources and now I have more resources. And maybe this is something that I'm just going to put a pin in this because I'm going to bring up a thing when we kind of transition off this topic a little bit. But I'm sorry. Please continue.
So
sorry. What?
I was just going to ask because because the idea of an aggro of a mid-range deck didn't really exist back then. Does the idea of an aggro deck still really exist today, like in practice?
Yeah, you still have like mono red decks that are a bunch of small creatures backed up by burn for reach and removing blockers. You still have white weenie decks. You still have mono green decks with pump and they now have even better removal than they ever did before with the cheap fight things and things like that. Those are all strictly aggressive decks that
Sure.
I wouldn't try and ascribe any other descriptions to.
So I guess a related question, where would you draw the line between aggro and mid-range then? Like what differentiates those things?
I think I mean it's one of those things where I don't know the definition of it. I just know it when I see it. Kind of like it's really hard to ascribe a hard and fast rule to a description of a deck, but
some hallmarks then.
Right. It's once you reach once the goal is no longer explicitly to try and be faster than your opponent in the majority of situations, you're creeping on that barrier.
Okay.
I think one of the most interesting examples of a deck that defies definition, even though it was almost always called a combo deck, Splinter Twin, you could call an aggro deck, a tempo deck, a control deck, or a combo deck, because it literally had the ability to play all of those roles at all times because of its composition. You could play complete instant speed control, never tapping out on your turn, never playing anything, and just burn out your opponent with bolt, snapcaster bolt. You could play you could play Delvers if you wanted. You could drop down a Vendilion Click and slowly burn your opponent out while countering everything they did. Or you could just, completely disguise what you're doing, pretend to be in a completely different deck, and then if your opponent makes the mistake of tapping out on turn 3, then they're dead from the combo. But it was always referred to as a combo deck because the marquee card was the Splinter Twin, the combo kill. But it was probably the shining definition of a deck that played almost every role perfectly. And I think that's part of why it was so maligned, because it was almost impossible to combat on any one or even two planes, because it literally could play every kind of game. It was the ultimate who's the beatdown deck, because you could, if a skilled pilot could instantly recognize what their opponent's doing and adjust properly and do gross things.
No, and it's interesting. I mean, and that seems to be anytime you can have a deck in your format where you can have that flexibility, it seems like they emerge from the top. I know it's not as ubiquitous as Splinter Twin, but the deck that comes to mind that I've somewhat recently is when Ravnica came out, that early mono red deck that was very much mono red aggro, and it had the Steamkins that you could just play red spells and pump them up. But then you also had the 4-man enchantment that let you play off the top of your library. Experimental Frenzy. And then that deck, you would be like, I'm going to play the aggro deck unless this drags out, and then I'm going to try to do the weird Frenzy combos where I'm just going to play out 20 cards in one turn and basically combo kill my opponent. And I can do that if it's like, okay, the control deck stabilized. Now we're not playing the how do I get the last few points of damage down onto the board. Now we're playing how do I resolve my Experimental Frenzy and try to generate more card advantage than the control deck before they kill me with their Tefris or their whatevers. And so being able to kind of have that, it's an aggro deck, but also it's got a combo in there if I'm going to pull it off, seems to be a position you want. I mean, makes sense to you want to be, and you give yourself that flexibility to shift your archetype, which can, I think, as Eric pointed out, really kind of answer that question, who's the beatdown.
If you'll forgive the metaphor real quick, I was saying in chat there, and mid-range kind of starts, if you forgive the video game comparison, mid-range starts when Terrans survive Zerg rushes and start doing things with ghosts and nuke launches.
So
I've never played StarCraft.
I have a question. So, because that got me thinking, JC comparing that, right? Other card games, do they? Because in StarCraft, there's not really a win option that is control. At some point, you need to be engaging with your opponent. It's difficult enough to play defensively that the best defense is a good offense. Whereas in Magic, there's definitely defensive playing, and that's a path to victory. Are other card games like that?
Yeah, I was going to get your opinion on that, Tam. Are you at, hopefully Tam's at the computer. Hello, Tam.
Sure hope so.
What up?
So Tam, I don't know if you caught that, but basically we were talking about this who's the beatdown, this concept of identifying your role. Is that a Magic thing, or is that something that you've noticed in Universes or any of your other multitudinous card games?
One of the best ways that I've heard it described was actually on a Final Fantasy trading card game podcast, where as opposed to who's the beatdown, they talked about it as both you and your opponent are riding on a motorcycle and a sidecar, right? And so one of you is driving and the other one's sitting in the sidecar. And if you're sitting in the sidecar, your job is to try and jump into the driver's seat and push the other person and take the game where you want it to go. And so this idea, this concept of people having roles and jobs inside of card games is not unique to Magic by any stretch. But I'm not positive that every game can translate every role that Magic has perfectly. Plus, I bet there's a ton of other roles that exist in other card games that don't bring over.
Because I know universes. I mean, I'm far from a I mean, I've seen you play some universes. We've talked about it, but universes in general seems like it's more of a tempo game because you're basically just both trying to power up your kicks and punches or throws or whatever, and you're trying to make sure you don't get taken out. You're trying to make sure you've got your blocks and all of that, while you're also trying to assemble and here's my situation that's going to take you out. So it's felt much, whenever I've seen it, it feels much more like a tempo give and take. I need to have aggressive plans and I need to have answers. So I'm curious, because I don't know if your game has, I know you said sometimes there's like fast combos, oh, we got this and it ended too quickly, or oh, this combo deck got too out of hand. But do you have that kind of role of I'm the controlling deck, I'm the aggro deck, I'm going to drag this out and try to answer your resources one for one, or get card advantage and answer your resources with, make you spend 3 cards, I'm going to answer with 1 card. Now I have utilized card advantage and I have gained a superior position.
Yeah, it's interesting because of how we treat card advantage in our game, because of the fact that how Magic works, and this is why it's so different. You guys draw 1 at the start of your turn. Well, we can draw up to 7 at the start of our turn, right? And so like the card advantage there, like you ban cards in Magic that draw 7, and we're like, oh, that's just what my starting. I have that on the board starting the game.
Yeah, we ban cards that draw 3 cards.
Yeah, so like it's interesting how like your tempo, your advantage is all about drawing a ton, but our big issue is spells that you don't actually have to pay mana for, right? Or
we don't have a problem with those.
A big issue that we have is there's a card right now in the game called Hellfire Impalement, which when it's checked, and sorry to bore anybody playing Magic, when it's checked, it's significantly worse on the top of your deck whenever you play it, right? Because we discard the top card of our deck in order to play every card in our whatever, but it's a really strong card because it has a bad spot in the game. Well, that card says when you play it on the board, you get to untap all your lands.
That seems good.
And so normally, because you check it bad off the top of the deck, you have to overcommit your lands in order to play this card because it's really good. Well, this card that checks bad and taps all your lands also untaps all your lands. And so you're just like, oh no, I checked bad, and that's the downside of this card. Well, let me just ready everything back up. Let me untap it all and throw it again. And so when it comes to finding out like roles and positions and how to read what role you fit into, you really have to look at what your opponent's deck does, what their character does. And when you have 2 aggro decks fighting off against each other, you definitely have to either be the beatdown and kill them faster or pull it back. So I think that this concept, this idea, transcends all games. Just there might be added roles or roles taken away based on like how the game works. Okay.
And Eric, I want to pivot a little bit before we move off of this article. You talked about kind of follow-ups to this article, and then there was one that you mentioned before we started recording, and then one you mentioned briefly, and it was it inevitability?
Yeah. So just a couple years after the original article was posted, before it was even reposted in 2003, Zvi Moshevitz, who was also one of the most famous deck builders, did his own take. He did an article called "Who's the Beatdown 2?" Subtitle "Multitasking," and in that he introduced one of the other famous concepts in game, struggle, which was inevitability, which is something that I hear Magic players talk about a lot, and that they don't really necessarily understand what the concept was initially meant to mean. But basically his definition is that a player is said to have inevitability if and only if from their current position they will win the long game. A player basically only has inevitability in a matchup if and only if they have inevitability on turn 1. So inevitability on turn 1 almost does not exist. So it's kind of realizing that you've reached that position where upon, if you do not make any mistakes from this point, you will win the game, and then shifting your focus to making sure that you tighten the grip on your opponent to the point where they have no, you at that point you start eliminating your opponent's outs. So it's another way of thinking that involves orienting yourself to the situation of the game and adjusting your style of play to account for how the game. Basically, the phrase I like to use is the texture of the game,
Right.
and it's another very good read. The goal of one deck is to take inevitability and preserve it long enough to take advantage of it. And sometimes that, for a control deck, that just means staying alive. And for an aggro deck, that means putting enough damage on your opponent that you'll eventually draw a card that just wins you the game on the spot.
Right.
So it's recognizing. It's an issue of recognizing what your role is and playing to that better than your opponent.
No, and it's interesting because when you said inevitability, the card that comes to mind is like, oh, it's the control deck. I immediately thought of Jace the Mind Sculptor when they start fate sealing me, when they start using that ability to look.
Right.
But then you pointed out, but the aggro deck can live in that world too. Because back when I was playing in the beta of Arena with that weird Amonkhet Kaladesh world.
She is restarting.
Oh, okay, Jason's having some technical difficulties. I'll finish my thought, and then we're actually going to move to a commercial break in just a second. But we had this position. I was running the deck where random up ruins was legal, and then we had the desert that dealt 1 damage, and then basically every single card in my deck has haste. And so it'll get to a point where it's like, okay, control deck, every single top deck I've got is going to kill you. If I accept a mountain, I guess it's like, if you don't stop me, I'm going to draw my, I dealt you 1 damage, you're dead. I drew my random up ruins, you're dead. I drew this haste creature, you're dead.
Yeah, that's exactly the deck that I was going to bring up too, actually, because I know you just mentioned the Experimental Frenzy deck, which can pivot into combo. But yeah, I think the Hazaret mono red deck from 3 years ago was actually much stronger in terms of pivoting to the I'm eventually going to grind you down with lethal damage, with indestructible permanents that you can't deal with, and lands that you can't counter, and everything like that. And that was actually the last time I qualified for the Pro Tour was with that deck. So I have a soft spot for it in my heart. And yeah, I think it was much in terms of inevitability, that deck had some of the strongest in recent history for sure.
It feels really good as the red player when you've got that feel. It's like my lands are going to answer you. Gosh, I really like that deck. I just bought an Invocation Hazaret because that deck was so much fun, and I want to put hers in something. We are actually at a good spot. We're gonna take a quick commercial break. Does anyone have final thoughts on this topic before we move out? We're gonna kind of pull the focus back a little bit just from this specific article and kind of cover a few more things. JC, are you back in, or are you still technical?
The only thing I have to add is that one of the things that a lot of people don't seem to recognize is how much this influences limited games as well. Everybody seems to think that especially in sealed, where everybody's kind of dealing with whatever pile of cards you open. It's harder to establish a role in a game like that, but I think that being able to recognize individually on a game-to-game basis what your role in a game of limited is supposed to be, and playing to that will probably raise people's win percentage a lot more than they give it credit for. I think people don't address that nearly as much as they should.
Well, that's interesting. Like, that seems like a very clear example, though, of what causes decks in especially sealed to be effective or not effective. Like, whether you basically build it with enough, aggressive cards to take that role, or whether you put enough in to shift it, or whether you even have enough removal and then run into a deck that's faster than you. Like, I think that's the best example I can think of what actually the mechanism by which a sealed deck or a limited deck sinks or floats.
Like, I see a lot of people get sealed decks that have pile of very good removal and rares and things like that, and then they will completely eschew like 2-drops and 3-drops and just random crappy creatures to gum up the board early on, and they will lose over and over again. They don't understand they've got these really good cards. How could they possibly lose? And it's because they don't address the fact that they still need to be able to put pressure on their opponent and be able to play the role that they of the attacker when it's necessary, backed up by their very good cards. And so that's something that a lot of people could spend a lot of time, analyzing of their own game.
That's no, I hadn't even. Yeah, I mean, I know you mentioned it, and again, pre-recording, but yeah, limited. It's not. This is not just that. Oh, we're in this constructed deck, and I know that I need to memorize that if I'm playing deck X, Y, or Z, I need to generally tend towards this role. It's feeling out the game and thinking about it during deck construction and whenever you're playing Magic. And I mean, we talked. One of the episodes we did was we talked about the idea of why am I not attacking right now, and I think that's kind of that's not a full summary of this article what we're talking about, but it's that question of when you ask yourself, why am I not attacking? You are sort of starting to come on to this idea of who is the beatdown. Why am I not attacking? Well, because if I do this, I need to let my opponent come at me and I need to expend my resources this way. Or why am I attacking? Because I'm going to kill my opponent if I keep attacking. I am going to make them answer my situation. And because I am the attacker, I'm in the driver's seat right now.
Yeah, if you lose the game and your opponent's at 1 life, you probably made a mistake.
Yeah.
And then, JC, you're back on. Did you have any final thoughts? I know you had to deal with the restart there at a few minutes ago.
Yeah, if you can hear me okay.
We got you.
Sorry about that. Oh, cool. No, I especially agree on the limited point. I feel like it's almost related to just knowing kind of what your outs are and where your outs are and stuff like that, and not building just toward one strategy all the time, because especially in limited, if you're just kind of building to play against one kind of thing, you're probably not going to go very far, because you're going to run into things that do that one thing better than you do. And you need to be able to play a different kind of game.
It's like, oh, look at my aggro deck. Someone might be faster than you, and you need to be able to adapt to the world where someone is faster than you. Even if you've built your deck going, I'm going to get them hard. Somebody else might have the same thought, and their pool might be better than you. So yeah, no, it's you. When you build the aggro deck, you just aren't always going to do this. And that's the core of the article, the mono white aggro, mono red aggro. You need to look at your situation and determine how you're getting to the end of the game. Okay, we are going to kick this to a quick commercial break. We will be right back, everybody.
Big shout outs to our sponsors this week. We have Nuclear Inked Custom Tattoo and Skate Shop. This episode is sponsored by Nuclear Inked Custom Tattoo and Skate Shop. At Nuclear Inked, you will find a very inclusive environment with artists that share your interests in nerd culture and fandoms alike. Nuclear Inked prides themselves in being Omaha's premier all-custom tattoo shop. So if you're looking to get a custom tattoo, please check out Nuclear Inked here in Omaha, Nebraska. A link will be in the description down below. InkedGaming.com. Are you looking to get a custom playmat? Well, then we suggest you check out InkedGaming.com. They have custom playmats, dice bags, mouse pads, and so much more. They have recently added a stitch option to all of their playmats. That's what I get. And mouse pads as well. Inked Gaming lets you play your game with your style. If you want to get 10% off your entire order, please use the code TCG University, all caps, no spaces at checkout, to help support the channel by customizing your game to your style. Cards Custom Build. Are you into cosplay? Looking to get into cosplay? Do you want to show up to events dressed as your favorite character? Well, Cards Custom Build can help. Cards Custom Build creates everything from cosplay accessories like props, trinkets, or weaponry, all the way up to full costumes. Do you want to make a cosplay out of perfectly flowing cloth, or maybe you want rigid battle armor? Cards Custom Build has you covered. Their work is guaranteed to make you the talk of the con. So go over to Cards Custom Build either on Facebook or on their Etsy account. Links will be in the description down below. And make sure you mention that TCG University sent you there, and you'll get 5% off of your entire order. And Dex Protection. Dex Protection is on a never-ending pursuit to create the highest quality storage and protection accessories. Their design and innovation comes from die-hard gamers and collectors just like you. So they know what you want in the products that you buy. They're constantly taking in feedback from their customers, and they have no plans on stopping their innovations or their drive to refine their products until they're recognized as a leader in their industry. They make terrific products, well, all with the avid gamer and collector in mind. So go ahead and check them out. A link will be in the description down below. And with that, let's get back to the show.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back. So when we're going to wrap things up today, kind of pulling the lens back a little bit. So we talked about who's the beatdown. We talked about this article and these different card concepts. Eric talked about inevitability and something that just... and again, I say this all the time. We've been doing this for over a year, so it's starting to run together. I'm sure this has come up, but I doubt all of you watching have seen every episode. something that this article made me think about a lot is that this was written in 1999 initially, and that Magic was really one of it was the first trading card game. It was the first of its ilk, and when it started, people were really bad at it, which makes sense. And it's easy to sit back and look at old decks or people talk about things and go like, "Wow, you guys didn't know what you were doing." They had to learn it. Somebody explained why card advantage was good to me, probably in the first 5 games I played. Somebody was able to explain all sorts of these concepts, and even if they didn't direct me to say who's the beatdown and read that article, people were talking to me about when you want to attack, when you want to block, all sorts of things. When I was building decks, people would give me advice, and you want to build in you want to build, if you're this kind of deck, run this many lands. And it just always strikes me as very interesting that we had to learn these, and someone had to invent the concepts or uncover the concepts, however you want to put it out there. And so identifying your role is always something, I mean, is I think a key one that we talked about this whole episode. But we were also talking about kind of going into this of back in the day, people did not run enough lands, generally speaking. There was an old adage I've heard older players say, again, this was before my time, that you build your deck 20-20-20. You run 20 creatures, you run 20 lands, you run 20 artifacts or spells or instant sorceries, things like that. And that is not generally what you want to do. And so I kind of just wanted to open up the floor to this concept or things that we've invented in Magic that have maybe trickled out of Magic into other games.
Well, I think somewhat learning this is somewhat of a gradual process, because at least in my own experience playing Magic, I kind of learned through just someone, like learning the rules together and how the rules actually worked and how like phases actually functioned, and how actually you moved through things. And losing being a great teacher, you just kind of start to realize what you like to play, like how you are naturally inclined. Do you actually like to play really aggressive decks? Do you like to play really fast? Do you like to play a lot of control kind of things? And if you're not feeling like the decks synergize with how your play style generally is, but also getting beyond that and ignoring kind of what your play style is, and kind of realizing why you're losing at different phases of the game, like the misplays that you're making. Did I not press on the gas pedal at this time? Should I have played more counterspells or control at this time? What if I would have survived a little longer? Could I have made it to this kind of phase? And I just think over time you kind of get a feel for where your win conditions are and how to get to those win conditions, and combine them with the feel of how games go, because you've just played enough of them.
No, yeah, absolutely. And it's and when we teach people the game, when you sit down for Commander with all of us, you're sitting down, or when anybody new, not new, but when you come off a hiatus and you sit down for Commander, you get everyone you play with experiences, you get all of that accumulated knowledge that we've all built up from articles or that I've learned from someplace else. And it's interesting. And it's weird to think back to those old days where we didn't think about that. We didn't appreciate, people knew Ancestral Recall was good. I don't think there was a question of, is Ancestral Recall good, but the full idea of card advantage and what creatures are good. And I remember I put a pin in this, and I want to make sure I ask, and Eric, I want to get your take on this in particular. So when mid-range came up, I was saying that mid-range would have been harder to exist back in the day because of just the card quality. They just didn't make impactful sort of grind planeswalkers, and more impactful creatures with enter the battlefield abilities have kind of allowed that to flourish in modern times. But I was curious with when it comes to tempo, do you think we could have invented tempo sooner? Do you think that's something that, like, if Magic started now, but we'd already had these kind of concepts figured out from other games and other things, that we could have had successful tempo decks winning tournaments long before we did?
You could make an argument that some of the like, for example, maybe the black decks that use like Dark Ritual, combined with Hand Disruption, combined with Land Destruction, combined with efficient Pump Knights and things like that, those could maybe fall under the umbrella tempo decks. Like you're looking to completely deny your opponent resources and while putting down a quick clock and but I don't know, like, do I think that a deck, I don't know. I don't know if I don't know. Probably not strictly as it exists today. Just because the quality of efficient cards at every point didn't exist across the spectrum at any point. I don't think,
Yes.
you really need you really need to be able to have answers to every possible thing at like 1 or 2 mana up and down the whole list, and I don't know that really existed at any point.
Right.
Okay.
I have a question. So, are there cards from that era that are pretty obviously in retrospect tempo cards? Like that's how they function.
Like Nimble Mongoose springs to mind because, like, if you think of those early Delver decks, Delver of Secrets is in the name, but when you're at Nimble Mongoose, counter spells, Force of Wills, burn spells.
I don't know if I'd call anything with Threshold necessarily a tempo card. Like you have to meet a specific condition for the Threshold cards to, like, you have to build around the Threshold cards. Like the card that jumps to my mind, and it's just a random, I think, man, my brain is just taking a hike on me right now. This is a random common. Do you remember the card Disrupt? It was like a 4 spike for instants and sorceries, but it cantripped.
Yeah.
Like that card was from Weatherlight. Yeah.
Yeah.
Originally, that's the book, right? Man, I should know.
Oh God, I started playing after the set
Invasion.
order
It looks
changed.
like it's from Invasion.
Well, it was reprinted in Invasion, but it was originally.
Yeah, fair.
But anyway, that's not important.
It was printed in Weatherlight. You're right.
Okay, cool. So yeah, like cards like Disrupt and little things like that were printed here and there. You could have probably I think extended back in the day. You could probably have piecemealed together tempo decks. Like there was the Miracle Grow deck that used Quirion Triad backed by Force of Will and Foil and Swords to Plowshares and things like that literally just like put down a Quirion Triad and countered and removed everything your opponent did and grew your Quirion Triad so big that your opponent, it just killed your opponent. Those were probably pretty close to what you would call a tempo deck. But it's such a nebulous term that it's really hard to go back in time and apply that definition to something in the past.
And something that might be easier to do that I might do this if I can actually remember to is I know that people play 98. Is it 98, 99 where you've just got alpha, beta revised in a few the first alpha and then a few of the more recent sets.
93, 94.
93, 94. There it is.
Yeah.
I'm curious.
Old school MTG.
Yeah, old school. I'm curious. I mean, we could easily do this. We could go look at old school lists that are in tournaments now after everyone's been playing this long and has all this experience, and go look at those old lists and compare. And it'd be interesting to see mana curves and number of lands and things like that, because I think that might be a window where we could actually say, let's look at a deck from this era. Let's look at a deck from the old school format and see what's different.
I don't know that it would be super useful because constructed events from that time, and there weren't many. Like the first World Championships was, I believe, in '94, and prior to that, like accumulated deck lists didn't. There are very few and far between.
Right.
But most constructed events from that time required you to play cards, like at least one card from every set that had been printed.
Right.
Which 93, 94 does not have that restriction. And so you're not necessarily going to have a good comparison.
Wasn't there like that terrible artifact that everyone was running?
Serrated arrows.
Serrated arrows. I remember Morrow talking about that in Drive to Work.
Serrated arrows saw a ton of sideboard play because you were required to play a Homelands card.
Homelands.
Or like Isan's Shade or Autumn Willow or something like that. Somebody grabbed like those were the Homelands cards that saw play because you had to play a Homelands card. Yeah.
Cards.
Like those were ostensibly not completely unplayable.
So one thing that's that this whole like conversation has got me thinking about, right? So at the end of the day, none of these concepts like deck archetypes or card advantage or tempo, like as a game concept, or mana curves, none of these things are innate to the game. They are not. The only thing that exists in the context of the game that is absolute, that is objective, is the actual rules of the game. And all of these other concepts are constructs or social constructs, or that's not maybe not the right word for it, but something construct, right? That we have created to interpret this thing that exists. Now, Magic's a little different in that the thing that objectively exists has changed over time, but like that interplay between this objective thing and all of these tools that we have created, this language we have used, that we have created to understand these game concepts, I don't know, I find it fascinating. It's so like, I just love picking older players' brains. I like the difference between how older, like I have this friend on Facebook who posts about Magic occasionally, and she runs an unsettlingly low amount of lands in Commander. And I believe the reason that she does is because she started playing Magic in like 1995. And it's just, it's a cultural thing too. Like it's so, I don't know, it's interesting to me.
I mean, our game has 27 years of history.
Right.
Most games at this level don't have. It's like 40K does, kind of, but the editions radically shift and change. And so you can't compare 9th edition 40K to 2nd edition 40K. And now there's still rules changes, but I can still compare card. I mean, I can still pick those cards in my deck. It's from 97.
Right.
And so it's weird. We are kind of a unique game that no other trading card game and few other games, and particularly the competitive style of game, has the amount of history and background and language coming up. And just, I mean, that's one of the reasons I love Magic so much. It's because I can sit here and you guys can pull out this set from that set. I was like, I wasn't playing. I don't know. I don't know when that card came out. I didn't start playing till Kamigawa was out, and I've still been playing a shockingly long time.
Well, and to me, one of the most interesting things about all of these quote unquote rules of Magic that we talk about and hold to be, sacrosanct and intrinsic parts of the game, they follow. They don't come into play first and then get used. They follow as a necessity of the innovation that gave birth to them. Like the idea of a mana curve somebody didn't go, oh, let's come up with a mana curve, and then Dave Price built Dead Guy Red. Dave Price built Dead Guy Red, won a tournament with it, and somebody went, why is that good? Oh, it's because he presents a threat at every point in the game, and if you at any point you fail to answer it, you lose.
Right.
You think one follows the other, but it's almost all invariably the other way around.
Yeah, it's a language that's used to describe a phenomenon that's happening because of how the game plays. They're emergent.
Yeah.
I really like this topic, and actually, I think we're getting to a point where we're going to want to wrap this up. I want to bring Tam into the post show and kind of, I always like to pick Tam's brain as the non-Magic player. But before we close things out and move to the post show, does anyone have a final general thought on this, or something else they wanted to add before we wrap things up?
Just a general thought and a conversation about history and how much history that Magic has, and how what we've talked, like the way we describe the game has changed. Magic really has to contend with backwards compatibility in a way that a lot of the card games that don't have the history that Magic does really has to. Old cards still have to be able to function how they should in a current Magic environment. By and large, obviously they phase out, different things that don't like matter anymore, but you still have to account for the balance and how those played and stuff like that in and I'm not talking like standard here, but like it is interesting that really current play design has to think a little bit about past play design and keep the game's like history consistent, and that's a really interesting problem to contend with.
I mean, think of the perfect example of we made Luras because Commander's popular now, and this will be neat. And there goes Vintage.
Right.
Like,
Exactly.
It's a blessing and it's a curse, I'd say. We get to say, welcome to Magic. Here's a storied history. Let me tell you about it. You want to be a part of it? Welcome aboard. You find any player who was playing back in the day and you say, tell me about the Weatherlight. They will talk your damn ear off. You bring up those old novels, oh boy, someone's going to have something to tell you. And that's awesome. It's awesome that we have that. And it's awesome that then you can go take those cards from that era and stick them in a deck and play them with cards that came out 2 weeks ago. Damn, I really like Magic the Gathering. That wasn't obvious at this point.
It's all right.
Okay, we're gonna call things here for the main show. If you want to join us in the post show and you are watching this not live, that's okay. All is not lost to you, I promise. If you join Patreon for a $1 a month, you'll be able to see the full shows where we talk through the commercial break and take bathroom breaks. You get it all. You get to see behind the curtain. So if you want to do that, $1 on Patreon. I wanted to say I haven't decided if I'm going to be streaming Brawling with Brett next week because next Wednesday is my birthday. But I might do a birthday stream, but I have to decide if I'm going to do that. So that's a possibility. And Eric, I wanted you to give it. I know you've got you have a Twitch, you stream. I wanted you to have a chance to plug that just so the viewers can see you play and hear you talk about Magic.
Yeah, it's twitch.tv/ESP_MTG. I haven't been doing much these last couple of weeks, but I plan on getting back into it very soon here. I mostly just stream Constructed and Limited Arena and Magic Online. So, but I might be doing other stuff soon here. I don't know.
Okay. And JC, I know you do other podcasts. Have you done anything recently? I want to give you a chance to. We have done this forever. Do you want to have anything you want to plug?
I appreciate the plug. No, I have not. I've been getting into some new things recently between blacksmithing and VR. I'm actually really thinking of starting a channel talking about VR because I buy and do weird stuff in VR that people don't do. So I should talk about it.
Okay. I thought you're going to start a blacksmithing podcast. That sounds awesome. I know nothing about I know next to nothing about blacksmithing.
I actually really want to talk about in the post show something interesting relating to blacksmithing and relating to the concept of swords to plowshares.
Okay, well, there you go, viewer. If you want to catch that, $1 on Patreon a month, just saying. Okay, we're going to wrap things up. Thank you all for tuning in. Eric, thanks for coming on. It was great having you. This was a blast. We'll catch you all next week. Have a good one. Stay safe, and remember who you are.